In lieu of Hasbro's recent disastrous decision to send the Pinkertons after a Wizards of the Coast fan for obtaining cards a couple weeks early, there's going to be some changes around here. Now, first, I explained in the last video how I feel about the whole thing. I still want to support great work, especially when it comes to Hasbro. It seems like great work comes in spite of the corporation and the licensors and all that stuff. So I'm not going to full-on boycott Hasbro. I know a lot of people don't like that. They like the black and white approach. But here's the thing, I feel like in my own head, and this, I know this is going to ruffle some feathers, so please take this as me just talking about me. In my own head, if I'm going to boycott Hasbro for sending the Pinkertons after a guy to intimidate, then I also need to boycott every single company that makes it so that I can actually get on the internet. Because they've done far worse. That, however, does not mean that Hasbro escaped scot-free. So, let's get into that. Now, in toy photography news, I will still be talking about Hasbro product, but after you see the photo score, the figures will get very simple passes or fails. Now, for the figure to get a pass, it has to be excellent. It has to be a figure I look at and think, man, that'd look pretty sweet in my collection. And those figures are the only ones that I will link to in the video description below when I talk about affiliate links and all that. I won't link to any figure that doesn't meet my own personal excellent standard. And that holds true across social media, and that holds true on the Toypixx website. I mean, once I have time to really fix it. So it's the best way I can think of to kind of hit Hasbro in the wallet, is make it a little harder for people to find that stuff that is incredibly subpar. Because remember, the excellent stuff, I want to still reward great work. But I'm not going to be giving them money and sending people to spend money on Hasbro product for stuff that is not absolutely excellent. And the fact is, I do plan on making Toypixx pretty good size. And once it gets there, I've got a bunch of followers that maybe don't click on those links because those links aren't there. It's the best way I can think of, like I said, to really hit them in the wallet. So that's what I'll be doing as far as trying to bust Hasbro a little bit here. And hopefully it won't last too long. Hopefully they'll start making some changes and really turn things around. But right now, I really would hate to be their PR person. Now, one last thing before we get into toy photography news. I did my first live stream this past week on the Fat DeLorean's YouTube channel, and I gotta say, it was a blast. I had a great time. Those guys are awesome. And I don't have people that I really can talk to about action figures, and I got to sit there for like an hour and a half and talk to these guys about action figures. It was amazing. Super stoked. I was super happy to be on that. Really, they're great guys. I'll be sure to leave a link in the video description to that live stream so you can check it out if you've got an hour and a half to kill. And, well, you just can't get enough of yours truly. Now, let's cue that funky intro. Well, hello there, everybody. I'm Photo Dave. This is Toypixx, and you're watching Toy Photography News for Sunday, April 30th, 2023. And yeah, I'm a day late. It was a long week, man. Give me a break, huh? Anywho, if this is your first time checking out Toy Photography News, what I do is I look at the past week's fully revealed action figures, and I give them photo scores based on 7 criteria. Those are sculpt, paint, whether or not they come with an extra head or heads, whether or not they come with extra hands, whether or not they come with accessories, articulation, and natural movement. Now, what natural movement is do they bend more than 90 degrees at the elbows and knees, or when they turn at the waist, do they leave some kind of weird, ugly cut that doesn't actually look like, well, it doesn't look natural. So, now that you've heard it all and you know the things, let's get into it, shall we? Kicking off the week with some figures we knew about but weren't totally fully revealed, we have the Mafex Rogue One 1.5 Darth Vader. He's basically a repaint. They made some adjustments in the eyes, it looks like, and possibly that blade that looks like when he's swinging it around. But I have to be honest, I'm kind of, I'm gonna be harsh on this one, which is crazy for a Mafex. So, we go over, obviously he doesn't get anything for sculpt. He gets paint. He doesn't have extra heads, but on the other hand, it is Darth Vader. Does he really need them? There are extra hands. He does have accessories. He does have articulation, but because that lower skirt piece isn't cloth, the natural movement is severely limited. And yes, I have the SHF one, and it's the same deal, so it kind of bugs me. So it bugs me here as well. So the photo score for this Mafex Darth Vader is a 4 out of 7. Next up, we have Aquaman from the Snyderverse, and he looks good. It's another Mafex. It's hard for me to be really objective when it comes to Mafex because generally I would just buy them all. But this is a repaint, still a good looking repaint. They definitely did some work on the heads, and it looks pretty good. I'm not sure I'd say it's exactly Momoa, but it's a lot closer to Momoa than they used to be. So let's just head to the photo score. Sculpt, because it's a repaint, no point there. But he gets a point for paint, a point for extra heads, a point for extra hands, a point for accessories, a point for articulation, and nothing impeding natural movement, so this guy gets a photo score of 6 out of 7. And now my favorite Mafex reveal was the Ahsoka Tano. I think this thing looks phenomenal. There is a little bit to be desired when it comes to the Rosario Dawson likeness. It's there, but it's not there. You know, it's not like mighty and strong and all that, but I don't see anything on this figure that's really going to impede much when it comes to motion. I just think she looks great. Fortunately, this cloak here, that's not plastic goods, that's soft goods, so that's going to work in her favor. Now let's head over to the photo score on Ahsoka here. She gets a point for sculpt, a point for paint, a point for extra heads, a point for extra hands, a point for accessories, a point for articulation, and like I said earlier, looks like natural movement's not going to be a problem. Ahsoka Tano gets a photo score of 7 out of 7. Okay, I don't know anything about Soul Calibur, so don't bust me too hard when I don't get this name right. It's Taki, I don't know. Anyway, it's her. And she looks good just like every other Storm Collectibles figure out there. She looks really phenomenal. She also has a couple things going on with her that audiences in the West would definitely not be used to in their action figures, which is very strange for me. And I consider myself, I'm a guy that took life drawing courses in college. Nothing really surprises me. But one thing that does surprise me is seeing certain things on an action figure that, it's just weird. Anyway, let's head to the photo score for this particular character. She's got it in sculpt. She's got a point for paint, a point for extra heads, a point for extra hands, a point for accessories, a point for articulation. I really don't think anything on her is going to impede natural movement, so she gets a photo score of 7 out of 7. From Berserker Studio, we have Hades, the dark armor version, and the gold armor version. And I'm putting them together because there's not a whole lot of difference here, aside from maybe the helmets. But I was really looking at this, trying to figure out how it moves and if everything's okay. And I could never get a clear picture of the waist, but it's also got the cover over the waist. So I think even if the waist doesn't turn well, it's going to be covered enough where we don't have to bust it when it comes to that kind of thing. Other than that, it looks strong, it looks mighty, it looks like a figure that could look good in pretty much anybody's collection, and it's got all kinds of stuff. Looks like it moves. There's good things going on here, so we're just going to combine the score here, and I'm going to give them both a point for sculpt because they came out at about the same time, and you know my rule there. It's hard to figure out which one's a repaint in that instance. So they both get points for paint, both get points for extra heads, both get points for extra hands, accessories, articulation, and they both get points for natural movement, giving both of these figures a photo score of 7 out of 7. I'm impressed. From Hiya Toys, we have Rambo. And the guy looks good. What can I say? It looks like maybe a little long in the face for Stallone, but other than that, it's pretty close. And I don't know what to say here. It looks like it's got all the things. The one thing that concerns me a little bit is ankle articulation. As I look closer at the boots, I gave it the natural movement point, but I'm not sure I should have, and that comes into play with Judge Dredd as well. So, let's give him his photo score. Sculpt looks great. I'm giving it to him, although he might be a repaint, and if he is, make sure and let me know in the comments. Paint, absolutely. Extra heads, plenty. Extra hands, plenty. Accessories, definitely plenty. Articulation, plenty. Natural movement, like I said, he's got the point. I'm giving Rambo a photo score of 7 out of 7. That takes us to Judge Dredd, who I don't know if it's just me. It might be, or it might be everybody. I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments. But to me, it looks like just an upscaled 1/18th scale figure. I don't know. There's something proportionally that throws me off, but I don't know the Judge Dredd that character that well either, so it's possible that this is exactly how he should look. And again, he's got those same ankle things going on. I don't know if there's going to be movement there or not, but I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt because it looks like it tapers in that way. So, heading over to this guy's photo score, just like Rambo from Hiya, he's got all the things. So, sculpt, he gets a point for paint, a point for extra heads, a point for extra hands, a point for accessories, a point for articulation, and I'm giving him natural movement, giving Judge Dredd a photo score of 7 out of 7. Heading over to NECAville, we have the video game Goliath, and I guess he looks like the video game version. He's obviously a repaint, but still looks good. Comes with his downed wings as well as his up wings. Looks like a solid figure, but he's pretty light on accessories aside from the wings and the head. Okay, in other words, he just doesn't have hands. So let's go check out the photo score. Nothing on sculpt because, like I said, repaint. He does have a point for paint, a point for an extra head. He gets a point for accessories, a point for articulation. And looking at these things, I think they've got the natural movement down. So he gets a point for that, giving this repainted Goliath a photo score of 5 out of 7. Next from NECA, we have a figure all kinds of people have been waiting for, and that is the redone Toon April. Looking good. She's got all kinds of stuff, but she's kind of NECA. I mean, totally NECA. So she doesn't have the massive articulation. I'm telling you, NECA, if you went nuts on the articulation, I would be stoked. Anyway, looking at April's photo score, she gets a point for sculpt because even though there's a lot of reuse, there's enough that isn't that I wanted to give her a point there. She gets a point for paint, a point for extra heads, a point for extra hands, a point for accessories. She has a heck of a loadout. She gets a point for articulation, but because she doesn't bend all that much, no natural movement, giving April O'Neil here a photo score of 6 out of 7. And now we're on to Super7 Star Trek The Next Generation action figures, and I'm just going to score them all together because it's Super 7. We know they don't move, but they come with a lot of stuff. Looks like the likenesses aren't too bad, though, which is kind of cool. So, here it is, the photo score for all of them. Sculpt, they get a point. Paint, they get a point. Extra heads, absolutely. Extra hands, yep. Extra accessories, of course, but the articulation looks so limited that there's no way they can get natural movement, giving all these Super 7 Star Trek The Next Generation figures a photo score of 5 out of 7. SHF went nuts this week, including introducing 2 figures from Berserk, so we're just going to start with those. And first up, we have Griffith. I don't know what to say here because I don't know tons about Berserk. I'm telling you, I'm a terrible nerd. All I know is this figure looks like it's incredible. And I know I say that a lot, but without any kind of reference, to me, it just looks like it's going to look great on anybody's shelf. So let's just skip the pomp and circumstance and head to the photo score. Griffith gets a point for sculpt, a point for paint, a point for extra heads, a point for extra hands, a point for accessories, a point for articulation, and definitely a point for natural movement, even though I don't think the horse gets too many of those points. I'm going to give Griffith and his mighty steed a photo score of 7 out of 7. And now we have Guts, and yes, I do recognize dude with huge sword. So, hey, he looks good, and I can't imagine anybody not thinking that looks cool. He's one of those figures that if I had all the monies, I'd probably end up picking him up just because he looks so good. And I love the Photoshop they did on that last picture with the dirt kicking up. It's just craziness that they pulled that off, especially for a product shot. Anyway, let's head to Guts photo score, where he gets a point for sculpt, a point for paint, a point for extra heads, a point for extra hands, a point for accessories, a point for articulation, and of course, even with that mighty sword, which I would say is the only thing that could possibly impede this, a point for natural movement, giving Guts a photo score of 7 out of 7. And now we have a chromed up cooler from Dragon Ball, and another one that I have no idea who this character is. I just know it looks incredible, and when I read its description, it apparently has limbs that look like they're reforming, so I'm assuming it's some kind of robot. I don't know. I just know, looking at this thing, it's another one I'd want to pick up. Anyway, heading over to the photo score for this thing. It gets a point for sculpt, a point for paint. It does have extra heads and extra hands, according to the description. It gets a point for accessories, a point for articulation. However, I couldn't find any kind of waist movement, so it doesn't get natural movement. This chromed out, cool looking cooler here gets a photo score of 6 out of 7. And now we've come to the Star-Lord and Rocket 2-pack, and I'm gonna say it. The bodies look great. The heads, I'm not so sure. Now, everything looks really good on these guys. I like that the costumes look like they're going to match the movie, and that's kosher, but I'm just not seeing Chris Pratt, and I'm not even seeing an animated CGI character in Rocket. So those, I don't really talk about that much with the photo score, but those are things to keep in mind. Now, with Rocket, his legs don't have articulation at the knees, and doesn't look like it has articulation at the ankles, but I'm not going to bust him because he's such a small figure. So let's just look at these two with a photo score together, shall we? Sculpt, they get a point. Paint, they get a point. No extra heads. They do get extra hands. They have accessories. They have pretty good articulation, which leads into some quality natural movement, giving this 2-pack a photo score of 6 out of 7. And now we come to a figure that makes me almost reconsider only sticking within the 616 when it comes to my Marvel collection, the Green Goblin, the Willem Dafoe version from Spider-Man No Way Home. This thing, wow. I don't even know what to say. It looks absolutely perfect. It comes with all the things. It looks like Willem Dafoe. Now, I don't think he's got any kind of going nuts, insane screaming head, which would be kind of cool, but the likeness looks phenomenal. So, I'm not even going to waste time here heading to the photo score. This thing gets a straight up 7 out of 7. I love the glider. I love everything about this figure. Again, if I didn't just stick to the 616, I'd definitely consider picking this thing up. And now we're on to the Hasbro portion here, so you'll start to see the pass-fail in action. Now, this first figure we're looking at is the Mandalorian Fleet Commander, and I think he looks good. He's going to do the job if you're trying to put together a lot of Mandos on a shelf somewhere. I think that's what this figure is really good for. It's mostly a repaint. The head's new. Let's just get into this photo score here. For the sculpt, nothing. For the paint, he gets a point. No point for extra heads or extra hands. He does have accessories. He gets a point for articulation, but because there's no more than a 90-degree bend at the elbow, there is no point for natural movement, giving this thing a photo score of a 3 out of 7, which obviously does not make him an excellent figure. Instead, he fails with a score of, get this, because this is what it means when you fail in a Hasbro figure now, a score of Pinkerton. That's right, a fail is a Pinkerton. Let's move on. Next up, we have the Black Knight and Cersei 2-pack, and while they are mostly reuse, they did a pretty good job with the reuse, except I really don't like the older stuff they're using on Cersei. I wish they'd do something about that. So let's just jump to the photo score on these guys. For sculpt, I'm giving it to them because they look different enough from their older counterparts, and you can't look at them and just say, oh yeah, that's a total just redo of something else. It's not like we look at these and just see straight up Bucky Cap. They don't get a point for paint because there's just not a whole lot of paint on them aside from their heads. There's no extra heads. They do both have extra hands. They both have accessories. They both have decent articulation, but they're both hindered. Black Knight by the waist cut and Cersei by not a whole lot of bend and nothing at the waist. So there's no point for natural movement, giving this 2-pack a total photo score of 4 out of 7. And on the pass-fail side, it earns a Pinkerton. And I clearly saved this week's mistake for last when it comes to Joe Fixit here. Now, he's a complete repaint, though the heads look really good, and there's something nice about the way that it works, the way that it works together, the way that this pinstripe suit is going and everything. There's just something much better about this than the previous version of this figure. But there's no butterflies, there's other things that had me really thinking about natural movement, so let's just head to the photo score, shall we? Obviously, he gets no point for sculpt, but he does get a point for paint. Look at those pinstripes, people. He does have an extra head, he has extra hands, he's got the Tommy gun for extra accessories, he's got articulation, and because he does everything in a suit that this suit would actually allow, I did give him the point for natural movement, which means this is where I screwed up, and that should say 6 out of 7. However, on the pass-fail, does this guy make it into my collection? Would I even consider putting him in my collection? No, Joe Fixit gets a Pinkerton. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what I've got for this week's episode of Toy Photography News. Now, do me a favor and comment below and let me know. Will you be picking any of these up? Was I a little harsh on the photo scores? What did I miss? Because I gotta tell you, there were some figures I was looking for that I saw earlier in the week and I couldn't find them. And, yeah, I guess I'm not very good at interneting. Anywho, as always, thanks again for taking the time to check out the video. I know how valuable time is, and the fact that you chose to spend some of it watching, well, me, is hugely appreciated. So until next time, have fun, and happy snapping. See ya.